numbers. What would algebra be without numbers? What would math be without numbers? Numbers are the basic building blocks of algebra. So there are different sets of numbers. Today we will discuss two types of numbers which are very, very important. We got to know real numbers and this corner, imaginary numbers. All right. Real numbers are all the numbers that we use in mathematics, all the numbers that exist. Now let's look at the different real numbers out there. The first one, they're called natural numbers. All right, natural numbers. It gets their name from the word natural, which means when I ask someone how many apples are there in a basket, they would naturally start counting from 1, right? All numbers from 1, 2, 3 and so on to infinity starting from 1 are natural numbers. No fractions and no decimals included. The next type of numbers are whole numbers. Well, when there came a time when we had to represent nothing. There was no way to represent nothing. So when you include 0 into the set, we have 0, 1, 2, 3 and so on to infinity, we have whole numbers. It's just all the natural numbers with a 0 gives you the whole numbers. All right? And no fractions, no decimals included. Then the third type of numbers are integers. This come in use when we have to talk about temperature, sea level, which are below 0, the negative numbers. This is where the negative numbers come in. All the negative numbers from negative infinity, let's say negative 3, negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, 2 and so on to positive infinity are your integers, no fractions, no decimals included. All right. And the fourth type of numbers are rational numbers. Now these numbers get their name from the word ratio, which is basically a fraction. All ratios are numbers which can be written as a fraction, basically a over b. All right, let's think of some fractions. Every fraction you can think of is a rational number. This is where the halves, the 0.5s, the 0.25s, the 0.375s come in. All those numbers, including all integers, all whole numbers, all natural numbers, make up your rational numbers. Remember, when you're talking about a fraction, you cannot have 0 as the denominator. Let's say 4 over 0. This is wrong. It does not exist. It is undefined. Remember this when you're doing algebra in future. You can never divide by 0. You will always get an undefined answer. All right. And coming back to rational numbers also include numbers which can be written as a fraction and decimals which have an end or repeating decimals. Let me show you some examples. And decimals which have an end are like 2.575. It has an end. And decimals which repeat like 3.212121, also written as 3.21 with a bar over it. Do you remember this? That means 21 repeats forever. And decimals like 0.7777, also written as 0.7 with a bar over it, showing you that 7 repeats forever. These are all rational numbers because these numbers can be written as fractions. Then comes the next group. Let's put them here. Okay, the fifth group. They're called the irrational. Remember, we are still under real numbers. There are different types of real numbers: natural numbers, whole numbers, integers, rational numbers. Now we come to the irrational numbers. Can you guess what's the property of an irrational number? It's numbers which cannot be written as a fraction. They cannot be written as a fraction. and the decimal value is a number which never ends. Never ends. It is not a repeating decimal like 0.777 or 2121. It's a number which never repeats itself and never ends. One very good example is a value of pi, which is equal to 3.14 and goes on forever and never repeats itself and never ends. Another irrational number is square root of 2. And there are a few more which we will talk about later. Now you can see here that rational numbers contain all these numbers including decimals, but irrational numbers are all the other numbers apart from this which cannot be put in any of these groups, comes into the irrational number group. Basically, just remember it's a decimal number which goes on forever. It's an irrational number and cannot be written as a fraction. Now, what's the difference between real numbers and imaginary numbers? Imaginary numbers are numbers which do not exist, and we will be learning about this in much later stage in Algebra 2. I'll give you an example of an imaginary number which is like a square root of -7. Square roots of negative numbers do not exist. You have to imagine them and use them in your calculations. All right, imaginary numbers are also called complex numbers, but this is beyond the scope right now in our refresher series. So this was the lesson about numbers. We'll go through it one more time. Real numbers contain natural numbers which begin from 1 to infinity, whole numbers 0 to infinity, integers go from -infinity to +infinity, rational numbers, numbers which can be written as a fraction, and they have repeating decimals or decimal numbers that end. Never use 0 as a denominator. Irrational numbers are numbers which cannot be written as a fraction and their decimal value never ends. Example of an irrational number is pi.